He's here, Mummy. I let him in. It's Santa.
Carpet Day!
Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus.
He is the shadow of St. Nicholas.
Well, hello there, I'm Papa John, and welcome to my channel. And throughout December, I've been doing the 25 slashing Santas of Christmas. Throughout the course of the month, I've talked about 25 different slashers with a Santa Claus killer, with the exception of like one, which we'll get into. But today, I'm going to take all of the 25 movies that I talked about, and I'm going to rank them from worst to best as the 25 slashing Santas and figure out which one is the best killer Santa. And if you enjoy stuff like this, I am inconsistent at times, but if you enjoy stuff like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and hit the notification bell, and share your comments on your favorite killer Santas down below. And if you want to hear more in-depth thoughts, check out my previous videos that I made this month. I'm going to try to talk about these a lot more quickly and say a lot less things just so we can get through all 25 without making a super long video. And so, let's get started. And in last place, at number 25, I have Deathcember. This is an Advent calendar-themed anthology movie with a couple Killer Santa shorts in there amongst them. And the best short is actually a secret short that comes on after the credits. But you have to get through 2.5 hours to get to the best part of the movie. That's basically the thing here, is it's a bunch of low budget and people having fun. Like, there's a lot of fun you can be had watching this, but try not to watch it in one sitting, because then it's going to turn into a very long slog with just a lot of cheap schlockiness. You can have fun with it, but that's about it. It's not very good. And next is one that kind of pains me a little bit, because I do want to champion this movie, and that is Once Upon a Time at Christmas. The acting here is very bad. It's very sort of low budget. It feels like, I don't know this for a fact obviously, but it feels like Craigslist actors or something like that. But the story and the concept here is great. I really love what they're trying to do with this movie. That's why I wish I could put it higher, because I really, really do love the idea that they're trying to execute here. They just don't really have the resources to execute that idea. But I do hope one day someone discovers this and wants to take this idea and give it the resources necessary so we can have a holiday-themed 7. I would still potentially recommend this movie if for no other reason than the concept and Simon Phillips' performance in the third act. And coming in at number 23 is Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, Better Watch Out. This one might not necessarily have a killer in a Santa Claus outfit, but story-wise, this is Ricky from the second movie, who was a killer Santa in that movie, at least at the end of that movie. So obviously it counts. Plus, it's in the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise, so it's gonna be on this list regardless. And essentially, this movie takes one of my favorite characters from one of my favorite franchises and essentially takes that actor, Bill Moseley, known for his one-liners, gives him the role of Ricky, who everyone remembers for that character's one-liners in the previous film. And so when you have a character known for one-liners, an actor known for one-liners and line deliveries, they decide to barely give him any lines to say. And this movie ends up being boring because the kills are boring. They make the most charismatic actor basically silent the entire movie, and he just ends up being a snooze fest. And next, at number 22, I have Santa Stein. Now, this is a fun concept. A kid accidentally kills Santa Claus, and then when he grows up to be this mad scientist, and he's kept Santa's brain this whole time, so he puts the brain in a corpse that he stole and reanimates him. You have this sort of reanimator, Frankenstein meets Silent Night, Deadly Night, because, he ends up being a violent corpse, risen corpse that doesn't really know who he is, even though he's meant to be Santa Claus, and so he goes on a killing spree kills a bunch of teenagers, basically. This movie is not very well executed, but it is a fun, different concept, I guess. If you want something different from just a maniac in a Santa costume, this version gives you essentially a Frankenstein in a Santa costume. The first kill, or when Santa Claus dies, that's actually a very good kill. That's almost Final Destination-like. But outside of that, all of the other kills are very boring. The sound design, at least in the version I watched, and I watched it on Screambox, was very all over the place. Sometimes the score was super overbearing. Sometimes then the soundtrack was the complete opposite and not loud enough. And at number 21 is Christmas Cruelty. This might be up there as the most disturbing Christmas movie out there, as this is essentially just, a boundary-pushing extreme horror, or at least that's what it's trying to be. But there's no real outcome in the end. It's just essentially feels like a snuff film. Obviously, it's fake. There's no outcome to it. It's just you watch this guy do these things dressed up as Santa Claus, and then the movie ends. There's no survival story. There's no outcome to it. And, I'm the type of person you might be able to convince the artistic nature of that, of experiencing something, being just as artistic as a well put together plot. But even in giving the audience an experience like that, similar to something like Hostel, you still have to have an outcome at the end, where in like Hostel, you still get the guy that survives. And at number 20, we have To All a Good Night. Now, this is just basically the OG Friday the 13th, but you put Pamela Voorhees in a Santa costume. That's essentially what this movie is. Technically, it was filmed before the first Friday the 13th got released, but because it was released after the first Friday the 13th, it just feels like this very rushed ripoff. The kills aren't that great, to be honest. They're ambitious, but the execution isn't always the best. There's some decent stuff in there, and you can have some fun with this, especially if you love the 80s aesthetic. And coming in at number 19, we have Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, Initiation. This is the only movie on this list that you cannot even argue is a Santa slasher, because there's not really any Santa in here. There's not really any Christmas in here. Barely. I mean, it technically takes place at Christmas time. And so this movie just ends up being sort of, you take 2019's Black Christmas and Midsommar, and you make a early 90s movie out of that, and you throw in some body horror from The Fly and the roach kill from A Nightmare on Elm Street 4. And you just kind of get this weird fucking movie. That being said, this is a movie that you can have a lot of fun with, especially with the body horror elements. But the story is all over the place. It's not very central. And just by the end of it, you're just asking yourself, what the fuck did I just watch? And not necessarily in a good way. And now at number 18, we have Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. Now, this should probably be in last place if you're going off of everything on a technical level, because essentially half of this film is just a highlight reel of the first film, and then the second half of the film is so bad that it's good. And so, on a technical level, this probably should be in last place, but it's just too much of a blast to watch, in my opinion. I love their kills in the second half. Like, yeah, the first half can kind of be a slog because it's just recapping the first. But you get some great one-liners in there. And I like how they edit Ricky into the spanking sequence. But I do really enjoy the kills in the second half. The Jeep kill, the umbrella kill. There's like the car crash kill. And that's just essentially why it's not in the last place. Is just because it is a fun movie to just get high and watch. And those are all the movies that I think are just flat out bad movies. I might enjoy some of them, but they're just flat out bad movies. The next few movies are movies that I think are halfway decent at least. They might not be a thumbs up, and I might not necessarily consider them good either, but I do think they're at least halfway decent. And next, at number 17, we have Cuento de Navidad, A Christmas Tale, which is a Spanish film from around 2005-ish. And this kind of has an It, Stranger Things, Goonies type of feel where you have this group of kids and they come across this woman in a Santa costume who's fallen into a pit. And it turns out she had just robbed a bank. And these kids essentially torture her into giving up her $2 million for them to enjoy because they're kids who want $2 million. And it does fall into some supernatural elements as the movie goes along. Oh, also, it is directed by Paco Plaza, who also went on to co-create and co-direct the Rec franchise, of which I am a big fan of. Now, Cuento de Navidad, I believe might have been his directorial debut, don't quote me on that, but it was before Rec. It doesn't have the same production. It shows. I think it was technically a TV movie as well. I'm not sure. But it is a movie you can have a lot of fun with, you know, especially as like an entry-level horror movie. You can have fun with it, albeit if your kids speak Spanish or if you find a dubbed version. I enjoyed what they were going for, but it just wasn't for me. I'm not the biggest fan of the Goonies, It style of films. And next, just cracking the Sweet 16, is 2012's Silent Night. Now, this is a movie that has great kills. It has a fun cast with Donald Logue and Malcolm McDowell. And I really enjoy the aesthetic that they give this movie. But the reason it's not higher, because I really want to love this movie, because it does have a great aesthetic and great kills and a fun cast. But the story loses itself. It's trying to be a whodunit, but then it just kind of cops out at the end, has a cop out at the end, where like, yeah, it's a whodunit, but you were never introduced to the person that's actually doing it. So like, how are you supposed to figure out the whodunit as a viewer if you were never actually properly introduced to the character that ends up being the killer? And there's just a lot of stuff that just randomly gets thrown in the third act to try and make things make sense rather than doing it throughout the film as a whole. But I do think it's halfway decent because of the cast, because of the kills and the camera work, and just the overall aesthetic. And next, at number 15, we have The Nights Before Christmas. And this is actually a sequel to the film I had in 24th place. This is the sequel to Once Upon a Time at Christmas. So you get the really good Simon Phillips performance as Santa Claus. You get his sort of Harley Quinn, Mrs. Claus helper as well. And they are the focal points. They're the reasons to watch this movie. Because here they get a much more front and centered story that focuses on them and gives them a lot more screen time compared to the first movie. Especially because they're the most interesting parts of the movies. Now, it's still got some acting issues, but it's not nearly as bad as the first movie. This is a big step up. The kills are a big step up as well. There is a lot of, I guess, TV movie quality to a lot of it. There are shots that feel like they belong in like the CW, essentially. I don't think that necessarily hurts it per se. You can still have some halfway decent fun with this movie. I do think the story and concept is better in the first one, but the execution is much better here. You know, the first one is a murder investigation where the murderer is making killings based off of the 12 Days of Christmas song. In this one, it's essentially supposed to be about, like, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas story and song. And I don't think that works as well or is as creative as trying to make murders based off of the 12 Days of Christmas. And next, we have All Through the House from 2015. This is another one where The acting is not great, but the story will drive you in. You know, the first couple of acts have surprisingly really good kills, especially given the quality of everything else. The kills actually seem to be pretty good. And that leads me to believe that maybe most of their budget and resources went towards the kills. But the main reason I put it this high on the list is because of the third act. Yeah, the acting is hit or miss, not that great. But once you get into the third act of this movie goes down a rabbit hole that is just crazy, but in the best way possible. You know, you just end up being like, what the hell did I just watch? In a good way. And this is just a movie. It takes elements from like Butcher, Baker, Nightmare Maker, Psycho, the first couple, Friday the 13th. It just takes so many elements and just blends them all together into like one messed up movie with just crazy ass third act that I absolutely had a blast with. Is it a good movie? Not really, but I think there's a lot worse out there. And pretty much from this point forward are all movies that I actually think are good. And we are kicking that off at number 13 with the Dutch film Saint. Now there is a little controversy with this film that you do kind of have to know going in. It does feature a couple actors in blackface, primarily because they're doing some kind of Christmas tradition that they did back then. They don't really do that tradition anymore, thankfully. They do more of like chimney sweeper having soot on his face rather than full-on blackface. Nonetheless, I still think the movie itself is a pretty good, fun movie. And if you're worried about that, well, those characters end up getting slashed anyway. But essentially, every time that there's a full moon on December 5th, the real Santa Claus, the real Sinterklaas, Saint Nicholas, comes back, and he is not the welcoming, charitable individual you think he is. He is a murderous demon, essentially. Once you get to the end, you actually realize how big of a scale this movie actually was, that you don't fully realize while watching it. You get some great kills. It explores a good concept of like Santa, of this Sinterklaas Dutch myth. And it was directed by Dick Moss, the same guy who directed the Killer Elevator movie as well as the 80s cult classic Amsterdam. And now at number 12, I've decided to put Tales from the Crypt. Now, if this was based off of the entire movie as a whole, I would put this quite a few spots higher, actually, because I really do enjoy and love this anthology. I'm primarily basing it off of the Christmas slasher, the Santa killer aspect, and that's only like the first segment. The other segments don't really have anything to do with Christmas. And if you want, you can throw in the episode from, I think, season 1, episode 2, which is a remake, essentially, of that segment and All Through the House. You can kind of throw them both in here. I'd put them in the same spot anyway. And essentially, I just think it's a short that feels like it gets cut short before it's actually able to reach its climax. And that's essentially why it's this low. I love the setup of it, though. And I love the environment and the cinematography created with especially the original 1972 version. So I do think it's very well executed. I just think the story never actually reached a climactic moment. And now, at number 11, we have Santa's Sleigh. This is the one with WCW ex-champion Bill Goldberg playing Santa Claus. And now I described this one as sort of if Troma made a Disney Channel movie about a killer Santa, this is what that movie would be. Because there are elements of this that have a very Troma-esque vibe with its sort of redneckian stuff, and then you have some Disney Channel vibes as well with the two main characters and the relationship with one of the grandfathers, and just all of that kind of, it feels very like Disney Channel vibey to me. Maybe that's just me. But at the same time, they always feel like they're in the same movie, in the same world, and so they find a way to blend those two things together without it feeling out of place. Plus, the opening scene here is one of the greatest opening scenes in all of Christmas horror, with Goldberg wreaking havoc on a bunch of rich assholes. And kicking off our top 10, we have Rare Exports. This is a film from Finland that takes place pretty much right on like the Finland-Russia border. And you have this kid who discovers that on the other side of the border in Russia, there's like a group of, I believe, Americans, they might be Englishmen, I'm not entirely sure, who are digging a hole into a mountain with dynamite because they believe Santa Claus is buried in that mountain. And eventually, they find him, and his helpers get set loose and kidnap a bunch of kids and everything so they can help thaw out and bring Santa Claus back from the dead, essentially. This is a movie that I think it ends up being somewhat of a slow burn in my opinion. But man, once you get to that third act, it is awesome. It's such a great movie, and much like a couple other movies on this list, it's very much a great entry-level horror film for a child to watch. Because you get sort of that Christmas childhood wonder in there, but you also get some scary elements with the elves that look eerily similar to Santa Claus. And you just get a fun third act that just has a lot of great action set pieces as well. And at number 9, I have Christmas, Bloody Christmas. This is a movie about a couple of metalheads who essentially get terrorized by a Terminator Santa, a robotic Santa, which separates this from every other movie on this list that is basically just a crazy man in a Santa costume. And you can have a lot of fun with this one. You know, the metalhead characters are a lot of fun. Some of the side characters, not so much, especially the cops. There's one cop who's just annoying as hell. I can't stand that character. But overall, it's a fun movie with a great visual aesthetic with sort of a grindhouse camera style and some neon lighting as well. It's a very fun movie. You get some gnarly kills. You get a robotic Terminator Santa that's almost indestructible. And you get a couple of metalheads that are just a lot of fun to be around and watch. And next, at number 8, we have A Christmas Horror Story. This is a movie that I discovered 10 years ago, and I loved it back then, and I still love it now. And this movie essentially tells the story of 4 separate stories, all taking place in the same town in, I believe, Canada. One of which features Krampus, who is basically the original folklorish version of an evil Santa Claus. And then one of them also does eventually feature a killer Santa as well. And then you also have one that features a changeling that terrorizes this family after they went to find a Christmas tree in a restricted area. And you also have one with a group of paranormal investigating teenagers in their high school's basement and boiler room. I have fun with every story here. I especially like the Killer Santa story. The Krampus one's a lot of fun. And I very much related, because I was in high school when I first watched this 10 years ago. And I related a little bit with the paranormal investigation story as well. The Changeling one is fun for what it is, but it's probably my personal least favorite. But overall, I do really enjoy this movie. I think it's a hidden gem in just horror in general. Like, it's not the greatest thing in the world, but it is a good movie that I really think more people should check out. And it also stars William Shatner. And next we have Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toy Maker. This is a very underrated, underappreciated cult classic of Christmas horror. You have essentially this Santa Claus, but it's more of like a secret Santa. You don't usually really see him in the suit necessarily, but he's dropping off gifts to these kids in town, one kid specifically, and these presents are toys in appearance, but they end up being killer toys that end up killing the person that opens them, essentially. And I really enjoy the creative concept here. There's one kill in particular that I absolutely adore with regards to the babysitter that just feels like a messed up version of Toy Story. And then the third act really just goes bonkers with this Pinocchio-esque story with Joe first name, Pedo last name, which coincidentally makes the toy store be called Pedo's Toy Store, which they don't make any jokes about in the actual movie or reference to how creepy it is to have a toy store named Pedo's Toy Store. This is a fun movie and a good movie nonetheless that takes some wild risks, but I think they pretty much all pay off. And next, at number 6, just missing out on the top 5, we have the original Silent Night, Deadly Night. Now, this is up there as potentially one of the more famous movies on this list of 25 slashing Santas, and it's probably the one most people will think about, at least prior to 2 years ago. And I really do think this is a great movie. I love the character study that they do with the childhood trauma of Billy seeing his parents get killed by Killer Santa Claus, and then as an adult, he's forced to wear a Santa costume, and because of that childhood trauma, it makes him go crazy in that Santa costume. I really enjoy the character study they're going for, and I think they do a decent job with it. Now, it is more of a slow burn, and I don't think it's the best character study of a Killer Santa on this list, because there's one that will pop up higher on this list as well. But overall, it does have some great iconic kills, and it's iconic for a reason. So that's why it'll come in at number 6. And kicking off the top 5, we have the newest film on this list, that being the Silent Night, Deadly Night remake starring Rowan Campbell. I really enjoyed this movie. I think as a film, it might be a little bit technically worse than the first one, but it's more enjoyable for someone with a modern sensibility. And I love how they kind of take this Quentin Tarantino style story structure and editing style, and they create this fun experience out of it. And this messed up love romance story as well that I really enjoyed. The Ruby Modine character is great as well. I do think she's getting a little overrated in terms of this performance, but she's still great. This is another one where you have some great kills, and I love how they take the skeleton of the first movie and reinvent it and reimagine it to the point where it's still a remake, but unlike like the 2012 one, it's also a remake by more than just name alone. Whereas this one, it has that same skeleton, but it does something different with it, you know, and it pays homage in ways that aren't just duplicating it either. And I like how they came up with something lore-based within it, embedded in it, that prompts itself to have sequels. Whereas like the original Silent Night, Deadly Night, it kind of just feels like a one-off that just was successful and sparked sequels. Whereas this one has lore bedded into it that you can easily turn into sequels and make sequels out of it. And coming in at number 4, we have 1989's Deadly Games, aka Dial Code Santa Claus. This was a movie I'd never heard of before this year. Before like a month ago, I'd never heard of this movie. And it was difficult to find a way to watch this because the only way I could seemingly find to watch this was the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray release. It wasn't on any streaming service anywhere. I'm so glad I was able to watch this because it is the definition of a true hidden gem. And if you don't know, this is a French film that heavily inspired Home Alone. I believe it heavily. I don't know if it directly, if Home Alone people actually knew about this or not. I'm not sure. But this came out before Home Alone, and it's essentially the exact same concept, but much more gnarlier. Because this concept is not just a couple of burglars going into a suburban house. This is a psychotic killer Santa making his way into a house. And the only people in this house at this point in time, because the mom had to work late, is this kid that has essentially every toy in the world at his disposal. Because he is a spoiled rich kid, but he's very endearing and you really grow to love him by the end of the movie. And his old diabetic grandfather. It's so well executed. It's the punk rock Home Alone that came out before Home Alone. It's got the kid dresses up as Rambo essentially and just goes to town on this psychotic Santa. And it is a fucking blast of a movie. This is a movie that every little boy should watch growing up. I know it might be hard to find, especially try to find a dubbed version because kids can't always or enjoy reading subtitles. That being said, this is a movie that every little boy should see because it is a badass movie with just a badass little boy character. He's a child Rambo. And kicking off our top 3 is 2015's Krampus. Now, I will say, in terms of just purely being a Christmas horror movie, this might be the best on the list. This might be number 1. Because I don't think any other movie on this list, especially the ones, including the ones I have above it, really capture the true spirit of the holiday while still capturing the horror elements. Like, there are better movies, per se, as just simply being individual films and works of art, but being a Christmas movie that captures the Christmas spirit while also capturing horror. Krampus from 2015 does the best job out of any of them. You know, one of the kids kind of has a fit and doesn't believe in Christmas anymore, even though he's trying his hardest to still keep that Christmas spirit and believe in it. But his family makes it extremely difficult, and when he stops believing in Christmas, Krampus shows up and scares the Christmas spirit back into them, essentially. And this is a movie that I saw in theaters. I believe there's only 3 movies on this list that I saw on the big screen, and this was one of them. I saw it when I was in high school, and I loved it then. I still love it now. And it's honestly just one of my personal favorite horror films from the 2010s period. There are some great practical effects works with regards to some of the toys, you know, especially like the Jack-in-the-Box toy and like the teddy bear toy. But you also get some good, decent CGI with the gingerbread men as well. It's just overall, it's a great combination. It's like a perfect combination of CGI and practical work, which is something you don't see a lot of nowadays. It's usually one or the other, and especially when they go more towards the CGI, it's not as good. And coming in at number 2 is Christmas Evil. Now, I do want to say my number 1 and number 2 are very interchangeable. You ask me tomorrow, and this one might be number 1. Because I like them for very different reasons. I think Christmas Evil is a damn near perfect deconstruction of Santa Claus while also being a great descent into madness style of movie. And this is the one I was referring to when I was talking about Silent Night, Deadly Night, of sort of childhood trauma driving someone into becoming a killer Santa. And I think this one does it a lot better. I think the setup in Silent Night, Deadly Night is a little more better of a setup, but I think execution is a lot better in Christmas Evil. And like I said, I love how they just do this artistic deconstruction of Santa Claus, because it's about a kid that grows up to be a man that works in a toy factory. And this man is obsessed with creating a real Santa Claus, essentially. And so he does the things that Santa Claus does. He sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, because, well, he knows whether you've been naughty or nice because he's been stalking you as your child. You're a child, and you have this grown man stalking you. He leaves present under your trees because he's breaking into your house. And there's a lot of juxtaposition stuff that's really well done. There's a moment where the kids are protecting the psychotic killer from their parents. Because the parents know who this guy is and what he's doing. The kids just think it's Santa Claus. And these parents don't want to hurt their kids. But the Santa Claus, also Harry in this movie, also doesn't want to hurt the kids. In his brain, he's doing this out of wholesome intent. He's not intending to harm children. He just wants children to have Christmas. They want children to have the benefit of a real Santa Claus that he didn't have when he was a kid. And so he becomes a killer out of wholesome intents. And even though, yes, it is a slasher and you do get some kills along the way, overall, this movie has more in common with Taxi Driver than it does Halloween. But coming in at number 1, as my favorite Santa slasher, would have to be Terrifier 3. I love this movie so much. Honestly, this might be my favorite movie from 2024. If you would have asked me a year ago or even in January or February, I probably would have said The Substance or Dune Part 2. But as time goes on, this is the one that I'm going to revisit the most. Terrifier 3 blew me away when I first saw it, and I absolutely adored it. The chainsaw kill is probably my favorite kill of all time in all of horror. I love how they take sort of that torture aesthetic and ultra-violent aesthetic of like early 2000s horror, the horror that was coming out when I was growing up, and it combines it with sort of the comic book tendencies of 2010's blockbusters with its storytelling. And you kind of just get this ultra gory, horrific, disturbing version of a comic book movie, essentially. And that's why I love it so much. And I love the Christmas aesthetic, because even though I'm a horror guy, Christmas is still my holiday over Halloween. I love Halloween. No slight against that holiday. It's a great holiday. But Christmas will always be my number one. There's a lot of fun Christmas horror movies, but I don't think there's necessarily a lot of just overall great classic horror movies for Christmas. And so when the Terrifier franchise jumped from Halloween to Christmas, I was ecstatic. And I love David Howard Thornton's silent performance and just the dynamics in his performance where he'll go from comedic fun straight to terrifying and horrifying without even cutting away in the same shot. And just some of the kills here, some of the most suspenseful building kills out there, especially the one in the mall. I just adore this movie. I love Art the Clown, and I'm a big Terrifier fan. And Terrifier 3 is my favorite Terrifier movie, and it's my favorite Christmas horror killer slasher with a Santa Claus killer. I don't think that made any sense. Oh well. Terrifier 3, in my opinion, is the best Santa slasher out there. Well, there you go. That is my ranking of the 25 slashing Santas of Christmas. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to hit that like button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell as well. Leave your comments down below on your favorite Santa slashers, and feel free to check out the entire video series where I talk about all 25 of these as well. And have a happy holidays. Have a happy new year, and Merry motherfucking Christmas, y'all.
Merry Christmas, Mrs. Talbot.
And a happy new year.
Thank you, and go fuck yourself. What a fucking whore.